What's going on, guys? In today's video, I'm going to talk about 3 of my favorite Bitcoin miners. I'm going to talk about CleanSpark, today not doing very good. I'm going to talk about IREN, doing great today, and I'm going to talk about BTBT, doing even better. And first off, let's look at CleanSpark. We do have some news here, and I would say this is pretty good news. They're not adding new executives, they're giving their current executives more leadership roles instead of adding on more people. And we have a little tidbit, maybe a hint about AI. Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but at least one of these execs has history with HPC, and we'll mention that in a second. But first off, effective immediately, the following proven leaders from within will take on new and expanded executive roles. Gary Vee, who is the CFO, has also been named president, and in this role he will support the CEO by overseeing financial strategy, treasury operations, capital markets activities, and legal and compliance, yada yada yada. Scott Garrison will now serve as Chief Development Officer and Executive Vice President. I'm not going to go into every one of their little job roles. You guys can read this. It'll be linked down below for you. But here's where it gets interesting. Taylor Monig being named Chief Operating Officer in addition to Chief Technology Officer role. This dual role will focus on operational excellence in Bitcoin mining, energy optimization, and corporate functions while driving innovation in software, hardware, and digital asset technology. Prior to CleanSpark, Taylor was issued a number of data center patents and won an Intel Innovation Award as part of the Auto HPC platform. It's just interesting that they mentioned that. I've never seen that mentioned anywhere before on CleanSpark. Maybe I missed it. Keep in mind, this isn't a new exec. This person has been with CleanSpark. I just find it interesting that this is being mentioned. I haven't seen it mentioned before, but like I said, I could have missed it. We also have Harry Sudok, who was previously the Senior Vice President, now being Chief Business Officer. And Matt Schultz says, these moves reaffirm our company's commitment to maximize megawatt monetization through Bitcoin mining and beyond. There's possibly another hint. They want to do more than Bitcoin mining. Maybe I'm reading between the lines, but these do seem like hints that they're going to be working towards something more than Bitcoin mining. I personally, and I've said this before, I kind of like the fact that they are a pure play miner. They are few and far between nowadays. Everyone else is going into AI, which in a lot of cases has helped the stock. And it might be what CleanSpark needs to get a good bounce, a good move. I kind of like the fact that they are a pure play miner. However, maybe it is time that they start branching out into other sectors, into AI, diversify their revenue streams a little bit. It might not hurt. The team has been responsible for the world-class strategy and execution behind America's Bitcoin miner and brings the same passion as we pursue our broader strategy that seeks to capitalize on all available opportunities. Is that another hint? You tell me. Maybe, maybe not. Now, looking at CleanSpark, it recently broke this clear up trend, this ascending channel we were in. Once we broke it, we did head lower. We're pretty much just sideways lately, slightly lower lows recently. Whereas the RSI has been picking up. We have a bullish divergence. The RSI hit a low back in mid to late August and hit a higher low recently, whereas the price hit a lower low. This is a sign of a potential reversal. Lately, we've been in this sideways pattern. Along with this bullish divergence, one thing you want to see is a breakout from our highs that we can't break out of here, this roughly $10 psychological zone. There's a reason we keep getting a bounce off of this zone, off of this $10. It's a psychological resistance and one that we need to crack to get moving towards moving averages, so on and so forth. Also, on the way down, we need to hold this $9. So we're in between two somewhat psychological resistances, the psychological 10 and the psychological 9. I do think a break in either direction will bring more of a move. If we can break 10, we're heading towards our 200 MA at nearly 11. If we break 9, we're probably heading to our low point here, this 850 area, and testing this as support. Also keep an eye on the 50 MA. We have been finding it as resistance over the last couple days. We need to break roughly 945 before we can even try for 10. A lot of this will obviously depend on Bitcoin's direction, and Bitcoin is likely waiting for the Fed meeting and upcoming PPI and CPI this week. Fed meetings next week, CPI, PPI this week. Now, I do want to touch on BTBT real quick. I didn't see any news specifically for it, but it's having a pretty decent day today. One of the best performing miners right now, at least. And one thing I'm watching is this somewhat of a descending trend line. We are basically right at it. It's starting to lose its steam here right when we got up to it, funny enough. And we also have these two moving averages that we need to break over. Looking at the same pattern on the weekly, it does look like we're trying to break out. I want to see a candle close out of this pattern to get confirmation. We probably will start cooling down to the end of the day. That would be my guess, is that we basically get rejected. and this could end up being a false breakout unless we see Bitcoin and Ethereum move. I do want to mention that a precursor to this move was a bullish divergence. We saw, let me pull this up, we saw the RSI hit a higher low here, whereas the price went lower. This bullish divergence could be partly why we moved. The RSI was starting to pick up. It already bottomed out back in late August, whereas the price went lower in early September. And we saw this imbalance in the RSI and the price on the chart. I personally think BTBT might be gearing up for alt season, and following the cycle, we are in basically the right time for it. Alt season is at the very end of Bitcoin cycle, and if you follow Bitcoin cycle, we are right at that point. Next up, I want to look at IREN. It's doing fantastic today, and they did release their update here. They saw $79 million in revenue for the August update, $26 million net electricity cost. They procured 10,900 GPUs, have a 50 exahash hash rate, and they made $53 million in August hardware profit. This is partly AI, very small portion still, but it's getting all the hype. And this is partly the Bitcoin mining side of things, which is much more of their portion of revenue. And I will show you this. Their AI revenue has fantastic margins, but is a very small portion of their business. They made $2.4 million in August, $0.1 million more than the month prior. And as for Bitcoin, their revenue was $76.7 million, a hardware profit of $50.8 million. Makes sense, it's a little less than the prior month. Bitcoin is lower than the prior month. Part of the reason was also seasonal curtailment. They also secured NVIDIA preferred partner status, and they have 9,000 Blackwell GPUs scheduled for delivery over the coming months, which is targeting a 200 to 250 million annualized revenue by December of 2025. They also secured 200 million of non-dilutive GPU financing, which is 100% of the purchase price of those underlying GPUs. And looking at IREN on the chart, it needs to break its recent highs here. I would be very cautious here. If you believe in IREN over the long term, I guess it's an okay DCA, but just be aware that it has ran an awful lot. This stock in early August, only a little more than a month ago, it was about a $15 stock in early August. It is now nearly 30. Speaking of 30, we need to break this psychological 30 that we just barely touched here. If we can break the psychological 30, maybe it goes higher. Otherwise, if we break these lows here, this roughly $25 area, we're probably going to fill our gap. And I think that would be an okay point to make an entry, add a little bit on the gap fill. But do be aware that it has run a lot, is the best performing Bitcoin miner / AI play this cycle. It was $1 back in 2022 when Bitcoin was 15,000, and it is now 28.50 as of this upload. Bitcoin has done about an 8x this cycle, roughly. And IREN has done about a 27x. I noticed in WEBULL comments all over the place, there's a lot of greed regarding IREN. People saying it's going to be $50 in a week. It's going to get to $100 this cycle. My advice is just be cautious. We did mention this big bearish divergence, lower highs on the RSI, but higher highs on the chart. And like I said, there is a gap right here in the 24 to 25 area. I think that would be an okay point for a dip buy, but I wouldn't be chasing tops here. Now I do want to mention Bitcoin, and we were watching this the other day. Bitcoin needs to break 113,000, break these recent highs. It has false breakouts, and then we can test our 50 MA nearly at 115. We are now heading towards our support level, this ascending support. I'll show you on a lower time frame just so you can see this clear pattern that Bitcoin's been following. We are heading down to this support. If we get a bounce, we are likely heading up to our resistance for another test, another attempt to break out. If we break this support, we are probably heading back down to this support line that we've been following on this channel. There it is. If we break this, we might head down to this support line on this longer term channel. But if we can break this green resistance at about 113 that I just mentioned, we have a chance to go towards our 50 MA that's on the daily, our 50 MA there. And if we can break that, we can head towards the top line of our ascending channel here at about 130,000. Following Bitcoin cycle, following past cycles, I showed you guys that September can typically be a rough month, and usually Bitcoin's last buying opportunity for the cycle before it tops out in November, possibly October, or as late as December. Bitcoin, in my eyes, is a lot more stable of an asset than it was in prior cycles. these drops aren't as severe as what we've seen in the past, these 50%, 60, 70% drops. We haven't really seen that this cycle. One of our hardest drops this cycle was like a 30% drop, and it was a fantastic buying opportunity that brought us down to 75,000. Bitcoin could, of course, drop more from here, but I do think any drops on Bitcoin are buying opportunities. We will continue to see more and more companies embracing Bitcoin, more and more Bitcoin being locked away by companies like MicroStrategy, by these spot ETFs. They're going to continue to have more and more assets under management, and Bitcoin isn't going away. You want some Bitcoin in your portfolio. In my opinion, Bitcoin is always a buy, always a DCA, as long as you have a long-term mindset, as long as you're looking at it as an investment and not looking at the next day, the next week. And my opinion is take advantage. If over the next day, over the next week, over the month, we see nice dips on Bitcoin, do take advantage. That's my opinion. But how are you guys feeling about the Bitcoin miners today? A lot of them are doing pretty good. I noticed Wolf stock is doing relatively well today. I do think alt season's approaching. Ethereum is still in between its cycle highs that we saw this year, these cycle highs here, and in between its all-time high of nearly $5,000. It's just been consolidating in between these levels. I do think when Bitcoin goes back on its uptrend, Ethereum will break out and move even more so, and Ethereum will outperform Bitcoin. We will see a fantastic alt season. But anyways, thanks as always for watching, guys. I appreciate you, and I'll see you on the next one.